Thank you for coming. It's great to see such a large audience gathered. I'm not surprised because of the noteworthiness of our speaker this evening. Dr. Anne Olivarius has managed complex legal and financial matters for over 20 years. After first developing her corporate finance skills in the mergers and acquisitions department of Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, Dr. Olivarius' legal career includes service as a legal and strategic financial advisor for Pero Systems and Computer Memories Inc., devising contracts that became widely used in software applications industry and drafting London arbitration rules that have framed international arbitration practices for decades now. Dr. Olivarius was the first CEO and General Counsel of the Sarnoff Endowment for Cardiovascular Science, whose assets, then valued at $100 million in scientific programs, grew substantially during her tenure. Before founding McAllister Olivarius, she ran the corporate department at Shearman Sterling's Washington, D.C. office, and it goes on. Dr. Olivarius has been cited by the American Civil Liberties Union on its list of the 9 most influential actors in the history of Title IX. Title IX is the US law prohibiting discrimination at schools and universities. Dr. Olivarius graduated summa cum laude from Yale College. As a Rhodes Scholar, she wrote a prize-winning doctorate in economics at the University of Oxford before becoming the first person, this is astonishing actually, to complete degrees from both the Yale School of Management and the Yale Law School, normally a 5-year course, in 3 years. I mean, that's just showing off, really.
It's when you have no money and you don't want to pay the extra 2 years.
Okay. Receiving highest honours. She is licensed to practice law in New Hampshire, Minnesota, Virginia. She is also a solicitor of England and Wales. And she is our speaker this evening, and her topic is women in the boardroom. Can you please give Dr. Anne Olivarius a warm welcome in the custody?
Thank you. Okay, let's try that.
Yeah.
I should say, just by seeing the group assembled and feeling the energy in this room, in a way, I have a topic that I have literally have prepared words to honor this topic. And I'll go through that, but maybe I should say something else that might be more valuable to you than just knowing about what I've done. Right now, I'm 58 and I work in London, and I've been here quite a while. I'm a British and American passport holder, and my whole life now is focused on doing good and making money to do good. And I think the intersection of those two things, when they come together, and you can get up out of bed every morning and do what really makes a difference to try to make the world a better place, and then get paid money, sometimes fabulous money for it, well, you've died and gone to heaven. That's one of the things that we do in our firm, and I commend it to you, and maybe afterwards we could talk about that if anybody has an interest in that, because I think when you're at the start of the great adventure, as all of you mostly are in this room, you know, you think about what am I going to do, and a lot of people get real nervous about taking jobs that, you know, maybe you don't like so much, maybe you don't know if you're ever going to be able to keep because of discrimination and other issues. There is possible, and I'm, you know, living proof of it, to structure work where you could actually work for people who really want to do positive things, either in the sustainability area or I'm doing it in law. Wherever is your gift, you should be able to pursue it. You know, most of the jobs in the world that you might want have not even been designed yet, and that's what we know. So I just urge you to think positively about that. You can change the world, absolutely, and you can earn money at the same time. The challenge is to figure out how to do that. When you have a network of gifted people like yourselves and administration who is behind you, as this administration is, you can really do an awful lot of stuff. So I think you're lucky to be here and to have each other, and I'm really pleased to be here tonight. Now, my topic is on women in boardrooms, and I've been asked to speak about whether getting more women on boards, essentially is a good thing. And what does that mean for business? Is it good for business? 1 year ago this month, two powerful, globally connected women, one is the president of the Law Society of England and Wales, and the other is the president of the American Bar Association, spoke at an international summit on women in law. And they put out afterwards a statement that said discrimination against women and minorities prevents our societies from functioning at full capacity and benefiting from the talent of all in our communities. We can't solve the problems of the world, but tackling discrimination within the profession is well within our grasp, and we should just do it. Okay, fair enough. We hear the rhetoric. We hear it all the time. The argument that women should not be discriminated against at work, though, has been founded primarily on fundamental principles of equity, the right of everyone to be equal before the law, and that it's just wrong to discriminate on the basis of sex or the basis of really anything. I agree with that 100%. In fact, 67% of the employees at my firm are women. And as women have fought, often using the courts, to assert they have a right to equal treatment by their employers, women's participation in paid work has steadily increased. But women are still significantly underrepresented at the top. In this speech, I want to examine why that is, what can be done about it, and what implications that might have for women and men starting their careers, as you folks are. I also want to make the argument that women are not only good in business, but they're good for business. And a lot of what I say also applies to people from diverse backgrounds. That wasn't my topic tonight, but it easily extends into that place. So let's start with this. A growing body of research is making a business case for boardrooms with more women, not because it's fair, not because it is politically correct, but because it is profitable. So the best kind of business, win it on the money, win your argument on the money. Studies of organizational behavior have long demonstrated that mixed groups are better at problem solving than like-minded people. So you get a group of people together, everybody thinks the same way, that's when you have trouble in boards. In the banks, for instance, where you have these rogue traders who go out and lose a lot of money. They're not being overseen, there's a trust there. They have real exposure by not having different people involved, so not everybody's doing the same thing with the same guys doing it in the same way. There's also been research, especially since 2008, and the crash then, showing that male-dominated cultures in top echelons of banking and business create ghettos of groupthink. They echo each other, and what comes from that is that there is excessive risk-taking for those organizations because they don't think out of the box, they don't see trouble coming, they don't see trouble in their own midst. Even the CEO of UBS, a man named Andrea Orcel, recently said that gender imbalance could lead to a culture of excessive risk-taking. Research by Catalyst, which is an American organization that aims to expand opportunities for women in business, has found a strong correlation between the number of women in top executive positions and financial performance among Fortune 500 companies. Again, they're finding it's good business to put women and minorities into boardrooms. Their 2011 study found that of those surveyed, companies with the most women on board of directors outperformed those with the least on return of sales by 16% and return on invested capital by 25%. Studies conducted in Australia back this up. Over both 3 and 5 year periods, the main primary Australian companies with women directors delivered significantly higher return on equity than those companies without any women on their boards. All right, is that a coincidence? Did it just happen that way? I don't think so. A report by McKinsey & Company called Women Matter, written after 3 years of research on the topic, indicates that companies with the largest proportion of women in senior management roles have the strongest bottom lines. Boards that are genuinely diverse, that can combine contributions from a group of people with different skills, experiences, and perspectives to offer from different backgrounds, are together more able to consider issues in a rounded way.
Mic a little closer to you.
Okay.
Yeah, so they can hear better in the back.
Thank you. Okay, sorry. When women are present at the top, they bring different and useful perspectives to the issues under discussion, which helps their firm succeed. At the summit I mentioned earlier, the British Minister for Women's and Equalities Issues, Helen Grant, took note of key recommendations which arose from the International Women in Law Summit in 2012. And she went so far as to say, women are at the heart of this country's economic growth strategy. All right, so we're hearing the language, we're hearing the talk, but we're not seeing a whole lot in action. So why then, if women are so good for business that even Helen Grant and Cameron's government says it's the case, why aren't we already 50-50 on boards of directors or even 60-40? What's happening there? The reality is women certainly have not reached this status or anything like it. Figures recently gathered by the BBC show women still hold fewer than a third of the most senior positions in the UK. Less than a third, 2013. In politics, this figure plummets to 1/5. So of all politicians, only a fifth are women. Prime Minister David Cameron pledged before the last election, and some of you may remember, that 1/3 of his ministers would be female. But the actual number he appointed? 4 out of 27. By my math, that's less than 1/6. Partly responding to pressure from the EU, which has proposed policies requiring quotas for women on boards, a policy from which the UK has opted out. They're not going to do that. They're not going to be bound by that regulation, in favor of continuing its voluntary scheme dictating that companies had to voluntarily increase the proportion of women on boards to 25% by 2015, or the government might take action afterwards to enforce this. I'm sure that position does not put fear in the heart of anyone. According to Maria Miller, UK Minister for Women, the voluntary program has been quite successful so far, with women now representing 15.6% of board members of the UK's 100 largest listed companies, which is up from 12.5% last year. Social media pressure to improve means that 44% of appointments to FTSE 100 boards in the last 6 months have been women. So there is some push, but it's slow going, very slow. And of course, the correlate to minority participation is very similar. But this is only progress of a sort. These are non-executive directors who they're counting here. Non-executive directors, these are people who can gather multiple board seats, and they have marginal power, marginal authority, marginal influence. The number of women executive directors, those that really are in the game and have effect, who are female employees who actually help run their companies, that's only crawled upwards from 5.5% to 6.6%. So that's the real game, and you can see that we're not even in it yet at 6.6%. So why then, 50 years into the second wave of feminism, are women still underrepresented at the top levels of business? Here are my 5 best guesses why. And I'm going to argue that even successful women don't always make it to the very top for 5 reasons. First, because institutions themselves have a set of cultural lenses that prevent many people from seeing women's contributions as clearly as men's. Second, because some women are socialized to be reluctant, even if offered, to take a seat at the table, even when they have greater skills and knowledge than others who sit on those boards. Third, because a whole complex social network that is responsible for anyone's advancement at work, the friends you make, the mentors who will take you on, who gets to go to the boss's house for dinner, or the golf course, or the bar for drinks after work, this group generally does not include women in the same way that it includes men. There's no easy socialization process to do this. Fourth, because of that age-old and vexing issue of work-life balance, which basically boils down to the fact that even in advanced countries, women not only bear the children, but we are still tasked with the work of raising them, not to mention managing domestic life. Women are still generally the household managers in our world, and patterns of work life are simply not adjusted to permit an easy equality in parenting, domestic and intimate life, and work for women and men. And fifth, and maybe the last reason tonight I want to discuss, is old-fashioned discrimination. Clearly there is less obvious discrimination than there used to be. It's not as blatant, it's not as vulgar, but I still encounter blatant instances of sexual harassment, bullying, and unfair dismissal in my work as a lawyer. All too often I represent high-powered women who find themselves suddenly passed over for promotions, receiving lower bonuses than their male counterparts, or sexually harassed. And we see this every single day in our practice. So I'd like to talk about these 5 factors. First is the idea that women's and men's contributions are not judged on merit. nor are not on merit, but through the filters containing all sorts of unexamined biases that tend to downgrade perceptions of what women can contribute. In my own life, this has happened more than once. For instance, I've said something at a meeting which is more or less ignored. Fair enough, nobody has to take heed of what I say. But only a few minutes later, to have the same idea that I've just put forward be put forward by a man, and it's treated as if it were the most beautiful and brilliant statement that had been made that day. Unfortunately, there's lots of academic support for confirming this tendency at work where women are made invisible. You take a recent study from the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. The researchers sent 2 versions of the same CV to 238 American male and female psychologists. So people who allegedly are educated to have certain sensitivities to sexual issues, to discrimination, gender issues. These are progressive psychologists, allegedly. And one of the CVs was identified as male and the other was identified as female. But they were the same CV. They went around, and in the end, the researchers found that both men and women, were more likely to hire the male applicant over the female, even with the same identical resume. This study, by the way, has been replicated over and over again in many cultures around the world, always with the same results. So this is nothing new. Second is the idea that women are scared of success and don't grab it with the same gusto as men. We tend to stand back and say, no, I don't think I really want that limelight. I don't really want to be that successful. I don't want to earn that much money. The idea that women have fear of success rather than fear of failure was first advanced by Martina Horner, who was the president of Radcliffe College, then which was the women's branch of Harvard in 1976, before Radcliffe integrated into Harvard. It has recently been revived by Sheryl Sandberg, the #2 executive at Facebook and the only woman on the board of Facebook. She has a book coming out this week called Lean In, which discusses this issue. She claims women sabotage themselves. In her view, it's our own fault. We deserve it. She says, we hold ourselves back in ways both big and small by lacking self-confidence, by not raising our hands, and by pulling back when we should be leaning in. And the result is that, as she puts it, men still run the world. I see among the women I employ that this kind of reticence is sometimes present, even for graduates of the best schools. Of course, this is also sometimes true for men, but generally not with the same intensity that you see it in women. I agree that self-sabotage does hold some women back. We don't talk about our successes nearly enough or let our voices be heard. Social conditioning has engineered us to assume the role of demure decorations, rather than have bold and brash personalities like Mary Portas or Ruby Wax, who would simply be seen as confident if they happened to be born males. A man with opinions is assertive, while a woman can be dismissed as mouthy, brassy, or even a bitch. In a recent business school experiment designed to test the validity of this fear, 2 groups of students were asked to discuss a case about a venture capitalist. The cases given to the students were identical, except that in one group, the protagonist was named Heidi Roizen, and in the other case, it was Howard Roizen. Although the students rated them equally competent, the students, I quote from the study, saw Howard as more likable, genuine, and kind, whereas Heidi, who had the same things to say exactly, they labeled as more aggressive, self-promoting, and even power-hungry. A colleague of mine, a very successful woman consultant at McKinsey, told me the story of how she made partner. Those up for partnership have to write a self-assessment of their career, demonstrating their accomplishments and assets they will bring to McKinsey should McKinsey decide to smile on them and make them a partner. My colleague sat down and she really stretched herself. She called me and she said, how far do I go about bragging about myself? I don't want to really brag, and how do I do it in a way that struts my stuff really well, but without looking like I'm a brag? So we talked about it, she sat down, she put together a document, and she said, I think this is fabulous, but I'm a little bit concerned that it goes a little bit too far. I'm not really as good as, I think I say here. So she gave it to her male mentor, and McKinsey gives everybody a mentor, which is a really good thing. And so he read it over, he looked at her and he said, in a scathing tone, he said, this is awful. And he said to her, "You don't sell yourself nearly hard enough. Do it over." She was devastated, totally devastated, and thought she could not possibly sell any harder. To plump up her accomplishments anymore would be just a lie. But she knew her future was on the line. She'd been at McKinsey for years. Everything she had sacrificed to become a partner at McKinsey. This is what she wanted her life to be. So she went, she sat down, she did it one more time. She shared it with her husband, she paced the house over weekends, she called her friends, read it. I was beginning not to recognize her, but then you think, well, maybe she's done stuff I don't know about. All right, but it was becoming more dazzling. She brought it to her mentor again, and the second time through, the mentor looked at it and said, "Get rid of it. Go back to the drawing board, do it again." He said to her, and I quote, "Our job is to sell our services to clients. And if you cannot sell yourself better, then you don't deserve to be a McKinsey partner." She was completely stumped, full of confusion, full of self-doubt. But she sounded out her friends, spoke to people, and decided to go to the PR world, where she took some advice. She listened carefully to this public relations firm. She sat down, she redrafted her statement. She finished it. Nothing left inside of her to say, she said. She looked at it again. She said, "I don't even recognize myself in this statement." Her McKinsey mentor, though, said, "You hit it. It's great. Fabulous." And today, she's a partner at McKinsey. Now, what she learned from that, and what the mentor at McKinsey told me, was that the men who have this assignment from McKinsey seem to have a much easier job of presenting themselves to make themselves worthy of a partnership at McKinsey, but her experience as a woman trying to present herself was typical of many other women coming up the ranks. So I agree that women need to be more assertive, but I also think this argument misses some important context. It puts all the responsibility for fixing centuries of discrimination on women. Of course, self-help is vital and valuable. You don't get broader social change without individuals doing the hard personal work. I am all in favor of leaning in, to quote Sheryl Sandberg, and agree many girls and women don't do it enough. But like my McKinsey colleague, that's because they haven't been taught how to do it, or seen enough examples so they can pick it up easily. It's just wrong to say that women can will themselves into a 50-50 status in a boardroom, though a lot of willpower is indeed required. This problem will not just be solved by individual action. Just as blacks in America could not positively think their way out of the effects of discriminatory Jim Crow laws, unequal education, lesser job opportunities. Not every woman can afford to hire her own PR firm to advance herself. This kind of broad change needs new laws, and government programs, and schools who teach you the skills of how to lean in. It also requires a cultural shift, which of course is a kind of chicken and egg problem. Which do you cure first? Cultural change can be created by new laws and norms, which also reflect cultural change, as we see in recent progress in both the legal rights and social acceptance of gay people in this country and really around the world. To my mind, the expectations of popular culture, while certainly more favorable to female progress than when I was just starting out, still present many constraints holding women back, and in some new ways. The increasing domination of image in popular culture creates all sorts of new burdens for women, that we need to look and dress like models. We need to be stridently thin if we want to be successful, and we need to be attractive. And join the boys in drinking hard and partying rather than develop our minds by studying hard. When my 16-year-old niece, who was smart and talked about being a doctor, all of a sudden she said, "You know, I don't think I want to be a doctor. I think my mentor, what I want to be, my role model, is Paris Hilton." And I thought, we've lost this round. This is really trouble. And she's not the only one of her cohort group who thinks this way. 2 weeks ago, you will probably remember this discussion, maybe participated in some arguments about it, but there was a big clash over the role of women in this country that was started by one of Britain's great writers, Hilary Mantel, two-time winner of the Booker Prize, author of Wolf Hall, fabulous book, and Bring Up the Bodies, among many other things. For a London Review of Books lecture, she was asked to name one famous person and choose a book to give them. As some of you may have read, she chose Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, and she said that she would give her a book published in 2006 by the cultural historian Caroline Weber. And the book is called Queen of Fashion, What Marie Antoinette Wore to the Revolution. Great title, huh? Mantell's lecture focused on the public image of Kate, the future queen, describing Kate as a, quote, porcelain doll on which rags are hung. To quote her still, with no personality or other characteristics to define her, other than for now, her pregnancy. Mantell predicted, and I quote from her, "Once she gets over being sick, the press will find that she is radiant, her only point and purpose being to give birth, and then to wear beautiful clothes to go along with, as Mantell put it, her perfect plastic smile." Mantell argued that Kate seems to have been selected for her role of princess because she was and is irreproachable, as painfully thin as anyone could wish, without quirks, without oddities, without the risk of emergence of character. Many newspapers responded with buckets of cold disapproval. Mantell was criticized herself for her appearance, for saying these things. People said in the Daily Mail, other places, that she must be unattractive, sexually lacking, and bitter. Such was the storm about Mantell's words that even David Cameron in India stepped in to comment. His take was that Princess Kate is bright, she's engaging, and she's a woman who was a fantastic ambassador for Britain. Which, of course, is different from what Mantell said entirely. She may be all those things, but Mantell also said she's a few other things. He said Mantell's view was, quote, completely misguided, completely wrong. This is a man with 4 women in his cabinet, just to remind you of that. The surprising bit for me is that the storm erupted even though what Mantell said is self-evidently true. Kate Middleton is valued for being a pretty piece to put on the mantelpiece, so to speak. And of course she is a princess, explicitly not normal. Still, her example remains powerful, as I noticed when my 2 feminist daughters and several of their feminist friends cried with joy watching her wedding. Of course, if Kate herself could speak, I doubt we would consider her a porcelain doll, nor would Hilary Mantel. She is intelligent, with a university degree just as good as her husband's. I do not want to treat her here as simply an object into which others can pour their assumptions. But in the popular battle for what is appropriate behavior for a woman, most of the press and the Prime Minister lined up with Kate, applauding and evaluating women on their appearance and what they don't say in life. Not on the Mantell side, where women's critical virtues are self-assertion, having a voice in the world, and writing the scripts of our own lives. I bring this up simply to illustrate that cultural expectations for women remain in considerable flux, which obviously affects where and how vigorously individual women can lean in, to quote Sheryl Sandberg, to the task of climbing to the top, and whether they will be criticized or applauded in the process. The third factor keeping women down is the existence of informal social and mentorship networks that still favor men. It is deeply embedded in human nature for people to feel more comfortable with people like themselves. We all know that. Where senior people in a company depict protégés who remind them of themselves. We see that every day in the office. This is why white men have always had the best system of positive discrimination. When we talk about quotas, one of the things I find puzzling is that there's always been a quota, and it's been in favor of white men. Now we say we'd like to change that in favor of a few different kinds of people, and there's an uproar of why should we even install these things? It's always been a fact of life. Positive discrimination has always existed, but not just for very many people in this room. It is easier for them to be slotted into sensitive and important jobs than women or persons of color. In the same way it used to be said that someone running a company's IT department would never get in trouble if he bought IBM. You knew you were safe with that, just like you know you're safe if you put a white man in post. So how can upstarts attain that kind of easy comfort level with their superiors that means that they too will be singled out for promotion? First, and it's a numbers game, research shows that you need to get at least 20% of ethnic minority or women into a firm before they stop being seen as tokens or unusual. So when you're looking for a job, bear this in mind. If you want to be taken seriously, you have a much higher chance of promotion, if the statistics bear this up, if you go to an organization that's got at least 20% women, and people of color. Second, it's become almost a cliche that mentors are crucial to launching or advancing in a career. A survey by the networking site LinkedIn found that having a mentor is nearly universally beneficial to professional women. But it also found that 19% of women say that they've never had one. 67% of women who have never been a mentor, served as a mentor, say it's because they've never been asked. Mentoring has a powerful and positive effect on aspirations, confidence, and ambition. The partner now at McKinsey would never have made partner without her mentor. It's quite clear. A report released by the Anita Borg Institute for Women in Technology found that mentoring has been associated with higher job satisfaction, higher promotion rates, higher future income, increased ability to find work and keep it, and women in particular report finding mentoring helpful to learn, to understand their own value, and gain confidence in how they present themselves. Female mentors and role models facilitate the next generation of female business leaders and create more inspiring business women in the future. A great deal of our professional growth stems from interaction with others and mutual learning. This becomes increasingly important, particularly in the current economic climate, which is so dismal, where competition is high in relationships and your connections, not only by virtue of what you can learn through someone else's experience, but their willingness to endorse you and rally behind you carries so much weight. It may make the difference in getting and keeping a job. Men are more likely to get workplace guidance than women. According to a text published by the University of California in San Diego, called Responsible Conduct of Research, an introductory guide, men are more likely to have mentors. They're more likely to be asked to be a mentor. They're more likely to have asked someone to be a mentor. Hardworking and ambitious women trying to climb the career ladder find it difficult to picture themselves at the top when there are so few women to look up to. A sea of gray suits may not be the most inspiring of views for these women. And this implies a circular challenge, in which a lack of senior women means a lack of role models, which perpetuates the problem we're trying to solve. More could be done to inspire women to work in corporate leadership roles. In a world of education, the University of Idaho has an excellent program for mentoring women. Now in its 8th year, the program connects undergraduate women one-on-one with a mentor. A more experienced undergraduate student or graduate student or staff or faculty member can serve as mentors, who strives to provide them with a personal, academic, and professional support, guidance, and encouragement. So it's your own private life coach, really, to use today's vernacular. Professionally, we might look to the Women's Executive Network in Canada, which has been fabulously successful, where women proteges are paired with more senior female mentors who help make these professional ambitions of these women a reality. And here in the UK, there's the Mentoring Foundation, which facilitates mentoring relationships for women, empowered by the vision that increased gender diversity in UK corporations has significant beneficial implications for the culture of organizations, their decision-making capabilities, their access to the full talent pool, and their long-term success. Indeed, there are successful mentorship programs for women today, quite a few of them. So to the women and men here tonight, to all of you, my best advice on finding success is get yourself a mentor. Get a good mentor. And don't hesitate to get more than one mentor. Every person I know who's been really successful, I mean off the charts successful, one of the things we notice is that they all say they've had mentors. It's really important. Okay, so the fourth factor holding women back is their disproportionate responsibility for home and family. An old issue, but still a current one. This is in some ways the oldest saw in the tool chest. I've been hearing about the problems of balancing career and family since I read Betty Friedan and the Feminine Mystique 40 years ago. But the question still bears examination, because it remains true that work-life balance, whatever that is a topic regularly and earnestly discussed at meetings of women executives when the men are out at the golf course, confident that their wives or staff are doing most of the balancing, even though their wives' jobs may be just as demanding and have equal potential for advancement. Let me tell you about a personal anecdote. I've often had conversations with female friends and colleagues, and as I said to you, in my 50s, a lot of people I work with, the women have been really successful. We've been grateful to be at the cutting edge when I came of age. Institutions that have been fully run by men and for men that open their doors to women. So I went to Yale with the early groups of women who were allowed access to Yale. I got a Rhodes Scholarship that got me to Oxford just the second year after they offered those scholarships to women. So I feel deeply grateful for those opportunities, and I've got to pay it back and help others very strongly. But the thought that we had then was that we could have it all. That we could have the families, we could have husbands, we could have careers. We just worked hard enough, we could do it. So we went to Oxford. After Yale, I went to Oxford. And there, part of being a Rhodes Scholar is that you're alleged to get the scholarship that you can fight the world's fight. You can fight the good fight, that you have a responsibility to be a leader, to participate. So be that as it may, when we arrived at Oxford, the wife of the warden of Rhodes House at the time, this is in the late 70s, who had no official standing whatsoever, she was the wife, she was no title, assembled all the women Rhodes Scholars for tea. And she said to us, however much we were supposed to fight the world's fight, we were not to do it at Oxford. It was not our job. She wanted us not to be stroppy, we weren't to make any waves, we were to be pleasant, polite, and know our place at Oxford. I'm the oldest of 5 daughters in a devout and fairly sheltered Catholic family. I was kept back from reception that first year of school and then the first year afterwards, so my mother she needed help at home, and I stayed to take care of the kids with her and to look after my little sisters who were really quite overwhelming her. My father never made more than maybe £20,000 a year on a good year. And his view was that if he wanted me instead to go to school right away, that I should go and work, like at an ASDA or something. This is planned for 6 months, and then I could go to a community school for 6 months, and this would go on for the 4 years of American education, and then finally I could graduate, and I could marry my high school sweetheart. And he thought that that was really a good idea. And my high school sweetheart thought that was a pretty good idea too. But it didn't seem to me like such a great idea, and I'd be a long time working in that store, but I think how thin it was that I almost did that. I came real close because there was nobody else doing anything different. Nobody said, hey, why didn't you go to Yale? I applied and my guidance counselor wouldn't even put my application through. You had to go through your school. And he said, why would you apply to go to a place like Yale? And I found myself defending that I wanted to give this a try as opposed to having somebody say, well, yeah, you go for it, girl. You go. You try and do that. Mm-hmm. There was none of that whatsoever. So for me, it was a kind of pinch myself privilege to go to Oxford and join the ranks of Rhodes Scholars, which of course include people like Bill Clinton, Rachel Maddow, and Obama's just announced nominee just last week for the budget officer, Sylvia Matthews Burwell, who's president of that $1 billion Walmart Foundation. So Rhodes Scholars have got a certain legacy to keep up with, and for people who get it, there's a view that this is a big S success, not just a little successful thing, but you're meant to go out there and do big S stuff, change the world stuff. So I've always been interested in what precisely defines success for our generation, and what it means more broadly. Because maybe it's not that you become, chairman of the board of the General Electric Corporation. Maybe it's some other stuff, and what is that other stuff? And because I take it for granted and I want to do something about the fact that I'm living the life that other people fought for, as probably most of you are also. So in my life, my husband and I both have very demanding careers. We are both ardent supporters of equality. We have an exuberant household with a whole bunch of energetic children, some of which I've had, others who come to live with us. That's the kind of house we have. Some years ago, I met up with a close friend who leads a busy life too, and she heard my song of gratefulness that we have health and a good life. And I said, I think I've been able to have it all, and I feel so guilty for that, but I'm trying to change the world by having it all. And she said, okay, she said, you have a job, you make fabulous money, but I still have responsibility, primary responsibility for managing my household, caring for my children, and all the older people who have come into our lives who live with us. And I realized she's very wise, because in a way, this is the trade-off that my generation made, and which I hope your generation doesn't make. My generation bought the talk, and some of us went out there and we are trying to change the world, and that's well and good, and we do the best we can. But what was the cost of that? The cost is that, of course, we're married to men, some of us, who, you know, in my case, I adore my husband. He's also a lawyer. He's come into my business. He practices alongside me. But I still run the household. He's a left-wing, you know, feminist. You'd hear the talk and think, wow, he's really out there. But in practice, as in every family I see in my generation, of all the women who are working, they're still managing the home. They're still managing the kids. They're doing all that extra stuff. So I don't know about having it all. I think I bought into a bum rap in a way, and I wasn't really successful in getting in my private life to, you know, change. I haven't been able to figure that out. In later years, one of the things I can tell you, as you move up the ladder, it took me a long time to accept that I needed to leverage my time, because you only have so much time and energy. And I waited for years to get secretaries in place and backup support, and especially with modern technology. You can type your own briefs. You know, I could figure I could do it all myself. About 5 years ago, I realized I'm going to be out of the game if I do that. I have to start hiring. Now I have, you know, I have a firm. I have 50 employees, giving whatever time of the year, whatever we're doing around the world. I've got 5 people just on my own personal staff who run the houses that I have, who do the driving, who do everything that's not essential for me to do for my children or my older people in my life. The personal stuff I still have to do and love to do, but anything I can send out, get done. I don't cook a meal, I don't buy food, I don't, you know, I drive a car when I have to. Usually it's not enough time, so I work in all the cars wherever I go, so I have a driver. I don't do anything, not because I've gotten lazier, no. I mean, I work as hard as anybody I know. I'm always working 7 days a week. I'm lucky my kids have now gone off to university, so I don't have anybody home this first year. I don't have that, so I'm free, which just means I work 7 days a week and I work all the time. But I love that, and I feel now I've earned that chance to work in that way, which I did with children, but now I don't have that. So all that time goes to the office and building up the business, which I believe in. Because we are trying to change the world, we are trying to make the world a better place, and I don't know how much time I have to make a positive difference. So I'm really motivated to work as hard as I can. But I'm doing it because I've leveraged myself. And that's something you all will have to think about as you get into places. You know, I don't have a husband I can leverage myself on. And all the women of my generation, they really don't have husbands they can leverage themselves on. And that's a lesson that it took me a long time to realize when I'm with this great man who I love and I've been with for 3 decades, who talks the talk and says, yeah, baby, you look like you're working so hard, as I'm up there putting the spaghetti on the pot, you know, and he's sitting there drinking his scotch, and I, you know, sometimes think, well, why is he sitting there? And why am I up here and not just Monday, Tuesday? So now I don't make the spaghetti, and now he can still drink his scotch. That's up to him, because he has to decide how he wants to live his life. But I've decided if I'm going to write the script of my own life, keep your sense of humor, get a mentor, and keep your energy high and leverage yourself, because without the leverage, you're just going to have exhaustion. So let me just tell you some stuff about the Rhodes Women. I started a project a few years ago called the Rhodes Project. It's the first time ever people are looking at high-powered women who have had privilege and a shot, an education paid for by a trust, to come to Oxford and get a degree. I went to Oxford and did a doctorate in quantitative economics. I came back, I've been grateful for it every day since then. But we decided to ask these women, so what happened to your life? You know, did it turn out? Was it worthwhile? How's it going? We found that a lot of the women are very wealthy. On average, they all make over $100,000 a year worldwide. This is taking from the poorest regions to the wealthiest regions. But 81% say that they had limited or turned down career opportunities because of their children and their husbands. And while only 43% of their male partners say the same thing. So that's really quite, you know, 81% of the women have given a lot up, and will acknowledge that. 43% of the men say that they've given some stuff up. And almost, you know, most of the women, 48%, well, not most, but 48% of the women said, I wish I had more time to spend with my kids. So that's a rallying cry, which is something you all will have to face into if you decide to have children and, you know, if you want to spend a lot of time with them. So we also found that 66% of our women were very happy with the fact that they realized that they had to do more. They had found a place of peace with that. So if you choose a lifestyle, the message is you find peace with it, it's powerful. But if it's disturbing to you, as it became for me, watching my husband drink his scotch, and I'm at the kitchen cooking, then you need to do something about that too. You've got to be true to what's going on inside of you. We had one Rhodes Scholar, she seemed to sum it up. She makes 7 times the annual income of her Harvard-trained husband, who makes a good income, but she made 7 times more. And she said he still will not go and take off any time from work to let the guy in to read the meter when you get a call at their house that somebody has to be home. And that seemed to sum up what it's like in my generation. But you get a chance to write your own scripts. But that's the baggage that came through with the first generation of feminists. I was recently struck by the story of Marissa Mayer on the same topic, who is just the recent, last summer she became the CEO of Yahoo, a company maybe some of you are studying in your business studies. It's a fabulously interesting company right now. She was not, she's the youngest woman, Fortune CEO of Fortune 500 company, and she also got the job in the beginning of the 3rd trimester of her first pregnancy. Now most of us would think as employers that that's a risky time to hire people because you're not going to get the staff you want necessarily as quickly as you want it. When she gave birth, she took 2 weeks maternity leave, and then at her own expense, she had a nursery in Yahoo built alongside her office so that she could handle her home and work responsibilities simultaneously. Now there's so many issues are raised by this pioneer woman living under a microscope. She fascinates me for doing this. You can't begrudge her arranging things to get maximum time with her baby. But what about women who don't have her pocketbook or authority to do the same? Now, have we ever heard of a male CEO building a personal creche at headquarters to look after his newborn? Yes, we've heard about taking the corporate jet to a hunting trip or putting mistresses on the payroll. Yeah, we've heard about that a lot. But imagine Jack Welch at General Electric or Alan Sugar looking after their kids in the C-suite. Well, it's happening at Yahoo. But 2 weeks ago, Mayer banned working from home, which is of course a real blow to the work plus family juggling of a lot of Yahoo employees, particularly women. She says more face interaction is required to make Yahoo innovative again. She's brought her home to her office, so she clearly doesn't have the same worries as her employees. But to be fair to her, Yahoo is in bad shape. It's falling apart. And if she doesn't turn it around soon, she herself will be looking after her baby at home, her home soon enough, unemployed. I raise Mayer's extreme solution to the problem of work-life balance because it backs up the data from the Rhodes Project that we're studying for our Rhodes women. Our generation of, quote, successful women with that big S, though lacking her CEO scale resources, has solved the problem of parenting while working by buying solutions. It's my solution. It's the solution of women in business. You hire nannies, you hire housekeepers, gardeners to keep the domestic front humming, and then you and your husband go out and work. So all of us face this problem, and the answer seems to be increasingly to privatize the solution. Now, that's one. But this solution comes at a price, which says nothing about the pay cut a woman effectively takes when having a child. There's been a study recently in the US, a very interesting study, economically very sophisticated, by Ann Crittenden, who wrote The Price of Motherhood. And she finds essentially, when she looks about women leaving and working and having children, you take a look at a woman who stays in paid work and she has no children and she continues on, versus women that leave to go have children. And you look at the earning differentials, she says in the United States there's a 20% earning differential between the two categories of women, but in Great Britain, here, in our country, in our life, there's a 50% wage differential. If you decide to have a kid and take some time off, that's what the numbers tell us. An article in The Economist this week criticizing Mayer's ban on working from home says it all. Flexible employers help women run families and jobs simultaneously. But why should professional women still have to shoulder the burden of running families? A recent paper based on qualitative and quantitative data gathered by the Rhodes Project researchers argues that the bottom line is that the opening up of professional careers to women is obviously a good thing, but the practical results are really complicated and not always an unalloyed joy for those who are benefiting from the greater opportunity and quality. So what can solve this problem? Over time, more men can get used to the idea of looking after children, and hopefully they will want to to get used to looking after children. They'll actively want it. It will be a gift. Maybe another thing, support from government and companies for parental leave, flexible working, working from home. Those things need to be done. And third, of course, better systems like childcare geared to working lives. You might be able to solve this problem for yourself by paying for help, as I have done, but problems like the mommy tax are systemic and need to be addressed on a broader scale. The better solution then, I argue, is to organize and lobby for a social framework that will spread the wonderful burden that is parenthood more equitably and intelligently. And of course, in this era of straitened resources, when there's not much to go around, and less it seems all the time on the part of government resources, this way will be hard. But Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark are way ahead of us on this curve, and there are really very many lessons we can take from them. All right, so this brings me to my fifth reason why women, and the last one, why women get knocked off the career ladder. And it's just old-fashioned, down-to-earth sexism and discrimination. Those old bugaboos. From my vantage point on the front line, I am sorry to say that it still has a really powerful place at the table. As I said earlier, I see it every day in my job. We've represented women at the BBC, at Time Magazine, at other media organizations, as well as at banks and at large corporations. And we find these women who come to us because they're missing out on bonuses, promotions, and they're told in so many subtle ways they are not as good as their male colleagues. Of course, it is tough, very tough at the top, and white men can find themselves treated unfairly too, to be absolutely sure. But I find depressingly often that our female clients are held to a different standard. They are made fun of for their looks. Not young enough, not thin enough, not gentle enough, not pretty enough. They don't seem to know their place. They don't quite fit in. They're criticized when they speak up at meetings and assert their authority, or made fun of for being dowdy, like Hilary Mantel, or cut out of the best work that their male colleagues then use to ride to promotion. Even now, many are sexually harassed and have to choose between making an issue out of something they should not have to experience or endure, and getting a reputation as a troublemaker that will certainly impede their climb up the ladder. This sounds like it's out of a book written 30 years ago, but it's remarkably true today. Lately, there's been a debate in Europe about whether there should be quotas for women on corporate boards. I'm all for them because they work, and to the best of my knowledge and everything I've ever seen, they're the only things that do work. They will change the landscape. Those kinds of laws will make life and opportunities much more enhanced for everybody in this room, to be sure. Last year, the European Commission set out proposals that require at least 40% female non-executive directors, so not the real players, executive directors, but the non-executive directors on the boards of big listed companies by 2020. The intention is that companies must have clear gender-neutral criteria for choosing non-executive directors. And that if candidates are found to be equally qualified, they must be equally qualified, then they say that the preference should be given to women and to minorities. The Commission said the proposals applied only to non-executives. They didn't want to touch the executive groups of directors because that would interfere with the running of business in Britain, and they didn't want to do that. In Norway, where quotas have been responsible for gradually increasing female representation on boards, in 2003, when the legislation went in, there were 9% women in Norway on boards of directors. Today, hold your breath, 40%. And more interesting to me is that when the legislation was first introduced in Norway, there was a huge brouhaha from all across the sector, from men particularly saying, well, we don't know if it will work out, there's all these problems. You don't hear any of that undercurrent. Now people, you were in Norway, I was in Norway just last week, all over. I was in Lillehammer. People there, in this, faraway place, are proud of having 40% women on boards. They feel they're being run competently, and the men at the tables I'm at are not saying, well, they're not looking at each other and saying, well, we have to deal with this. No, they're really outspoken all across the country about this. It's been a very positive development. And if Norway can do it, why can't Britain do it? Are we lesser? Is there some reason we can't achieve these things if there's a will to achieve them? So the men in Norway seem to be basically won over on that topic. Of course, there will be occasions where quotas may lead to unfairness, but now it's sexism, discrimination, and cultural bias that leads to unfairness. Everybody in this room knows it. You have to break eggs to make an omelet. Once the system opens up for real and you have real access, then the quotas, of course, should be phased out. There's no more reason to have them. It is clear to me that since the 1960s, most women in the privileged West have been raising children, looking after elderly relatives, loving their partners and friends, making sure everyone is fed, clothed, and happy. While as the Roche Project data demonstrates, holding every possible kind of full-time job. Clearly, women's accomplishments over the past 30 years have been at least as great as men's. If you look at it that way, perhaps far greater. This talent should not be squandered. I would contend that figuring out how to most usefully allocate the diverse energies and talents of all people, women and men, is a central challenge, your central challenge, of this 21st century. It is worth stating the position regarding women for what it is, which is not good enough. But all we can do is start from where we are, which indeed is better than it used to be, and keep fighting, making things better one day at a time. The laws are better than they used to be, and while cultural attitudes about women are still confused and restricting, there is now more room and more women to advance. At my firm, we almost always win the cases we bring when women are discriminated against, and often, truly most of the time, with a quiet but satisfactorily large settlement amount, because companies do not want to be embarrassed to be seen to be discriminators. This is not the promised land, but it is progress. Thank you.
So Dr. Ann would take some questions. I'll open it up to you for any questions that you might have. Yes.
You mentioned something about women being their own worst enemies. Is occasionally the situation that women are the enemies of other women? So the fact that a woman has got to the top, do we see, and is this a bit of a negative for other women trying to get up there?
Yeah, I mean, this is a sad thing, but certainly our data also shows that the women who are really successful, you know, you do then trip a quality in people called jealousy. And, you know, somehow it's amazing, but, you know, we don't have women saying, yeah, you did it, and now I'm going to do it. We seem to have, you did it, and, you know, we're not this, that, or the other thing. And I think the women I know have felt a lot of exposure to women who are, you know, get jealous and another thing. You feel that pain. There's no doubt about it. You know, and particularly, you know, in my own case, I came, as I said, from a really working class, really fairly poor background. And I think it was really hard to leave your social circumstances. When I left my town in New Jersey, all my friends, the kids I grew up with, you know, my boyfriend at the time was running a petrol station, not even, you know, pumping the petrol in the petrol station. Those are still the days you pumped it. You didn't get out and do it yourself. And, you know, that was considered a good job in the community where I grew up. And as you leave that behind, you know, you love those people, that you know those people, that's your community. But then you are in another community, and then you start to walk the walk and talk the talk of another way of life. And occasionally it's very painful for me when I go places and, you know, I see people from my past, and, you know, we dress differently. There's no signs that we know each other until you have the facial contact and you have the conversation. We've gone such different places. It's really tough. And most of you probably are going to experience that. Your education here equips you to go and write a script of a life that might have been different than what you were born into.
Yes.
What was it that actually prompted you to start your own firm? How does that play out in this personal history?
Yeah, that's a good question. I must say, I have been very grateful that I have my own firm through the upsides of the market and the downsides. We run a firm, as I said, we just hire the best that we can find, and we don't care about, you know, male, female, black, white, gay, straight, fat, thin. I don't care. They have to have a sense of humor because life is tough, and the practice that we do We have a commercial practice that does international work and deals, and then we also have a pay-it-forward practice separate that does child protection work. And in that practice, we sue the Catholic Church, we sue the people who think it's okay for priests and certain group of people go out and rape young boys and young girls. So we do that as our sort of pay it forward, pay it back, thank you for the privileges that we have practice. Our main practice, though, every day I feel grateful because I'm insulated from redundancy. I don't have to worry about somebody coming in and saying, we don't like you. All those women we represent, I'm not going to be one of them. The challenge is, of course, you've got to bring work in and you've got to keep your business growing. And I used to think if you were really good at what you did, then you just earned your stripes and people would come to you. But I've learned it's not that way. To get business, you have to use your social network. All of you have got to stay in touch with each other. This is where you're probably going to get your work. It's through each other, through the social networking that you do. Because that's how jobs get done, how you get found. We hire people, all of our best people come through networks. I get a telephone call, Nora might call me someday and say, hey, what about Sammy, Joe, Helen, Martha? And I take that call, and those are the people that you tend to hire. That's always been the case. I got there because I was with Sherman & Sterling, and I was running their corporate department, which is a great law firm, and they like to think of themselves as the best law firm in the world, because that's what the guys who run the place say. And so I was running the corporate department in Washington, and my husband came in one day, and I thought we had a really close relationship. I knew what he was thinking all the time. And he came in with this twinkle in his eye, and he said he'd just been given this job offer. We were in Virginia, to go to London to be the bureau chief to run Time magazine in London. And I looked at him and said, what? This is the plummiest job in journalism those days. Everybody would kill for that job. My husband's not the sort that ever would put anything in anybody's back. He's not a political player. I said, did they just come up to you and say, hey, Jeff McAllister, we're going to give you the best job, in the world for journalism? He said, well, no, I sort of have been agitating for it a little bit. And he had this look in his eye that I thought, right, it's either going to be a mistress or it's going to be another adventure. We better go to London. After I went to London, then I thought maybe it should have been the mistress. But it's hard to move cultures, of course. It's really hard with family and a whole bunch of kids. We had a lot of stuff going on, and journalism doesn't pay a lot. And as a lawyer, to move to a different country, that's a tall order because I wasn't licensed initially as a British solicitor. So I had some work, but you could only do non-contentious work as an American lawyer. And I had to requalify. Okay, so we came in '99, I was early 40s. I wasn't thinking much that I wanted to go back and have to requalify to go through that process, so it was tough. But I either could have gone to work for Sherman & Sterling or another big firm, but I thought being in London, it's going to be tough because I have all these kids and, I really care about getting them launched and I want to be around enough. And with Sherman & Sterling was always the beeper going off, you're available all the time. At Sherman & Sterling, I would have to call people occasionally in the practice. I remember calling this guy on his honeymoon, and saying, Jacques, I'm so sorry. He said, I know I have to come back. The deal is on. I said, I'm so sorry. And you could hear his wife already saying, what? But he had to come back. I brought a guy back who just arrived in Antarctica after a 3-week trip. He had it saved up and had 5 weeks off, and I had to say to the office, call him. He has to come back. And they come like that because they get paid enough money. If they don't come back, they're out of the job. And so that's it. And I knew that was going to be really hard with my kids. And then my mother-in-law came to visit for a weekend and stayed 10 years. So that needed to have some attention also. And you want to try and be effective in that way. And so it was better to start my own business. And I thought a little business, but then it grew. And the first deal that came in was to sell the Savoy Theater, and that became a big thing real fast. And then you're in the game. So I think if you can run your own business, there's nothing quite as sweet. There's nothing quite as satisfying. You did it yourself. You got your own profits. It's a great tax, savings plan in a way. You can really do some smart stuff without getting, a whole bunch of people that have to go along with you. You can do it yourself. And most importantly, I run the business democratically. I run it as a fun place. It's a feminist stronghold. It's an equal rights place. We've got the 2 biggest negotiated settlements in the entire world for black women in professional service jobs against one of the most massive institutions in the world. And we got our settlement not only for the group of all blacks working at this place, but We also got millions and millions and millions extra that the organization had to do towards social change. So we do a lot of our assignments. We'll say we'll take the money for the women, and it has to be big enough because they have to feel the pain to motivate them not to discriminate. But in addition, for the racial insult, we said, now we want you to start a program to advance black women, to which they say no. We say, no, we'll back out. It's not going to be part of a settlement term, so nobody's going to know about it. You can take it up, you can just announce it in the press that you as a first-rate firm is going to offer this new sexy program. Nobody's going to say we're behind your back, you know, pushing you to do it and forcing you, or we're going to go public on what's happened, you know, at this firm to blacks and to women. And so they started this really progressive, you know, program. They're taking all the bows. That's great. I don't need to be out there. I'm glad to be the backroom girl and to make other people look good. That really works for me. But that's the kind of stuff we try to do. So you get your money for your clients, and then you make sure you get a piece for social change, and they don't have the problem again. But they pay so much to the women that I don't think they'd ever be incentivized to risk, you know, discriminating against a black woman again in those firms. And in one of the investment banks, we've also taken them down on that stuff also. And these are all this is my social world, of course. And that's the great thing, you know, I had a call from Walmart some years ago from a woman, a black woman in Walmart. She said to me, Tennessee, she said, I got locked in 3 weeks ago to Walmart at night because Walmart in the United States had a policy where at midnight they lock the doors. So if you're working inside of a warehouse, you can't get out until they open those doors at 6 in the morning. This woman was there, 7.5 months pregnant, and she goes into labor. She can't get out of the place, and it's a hard labor. She explains to me that she's in desperation. And on the floor are apparently 19 men, just by chance. She noticed that I never counted, but I was the only woman. 19 men. It's now 2 o'clock in the morning. She can't get out. They're locked in. She's in intensive labor. And she realizes, she said, I knew I was going to have that baby. And so I just started concentrating. The pain was terrible. She never had a kid before. So these 19 men all came standing around. And, you know, what do we do? Wanting to help, but not having a clue. And she said, first I had this terrible shame that in front of 19 men I have to give birth to this child. And then I just felt, who cares? I just want to live. I desperately want to live. I want my child to live. She was sent to the hospital at 6:02 when the doors opened. And she called me and she said, would we handle that lawsuit? Now, that's the kind of issue that I run across the room to take because I want Walmart to change. But I also realize as a businesswoman that that's not my case. Why is it not my case? Because Walmart is a place that runs on white boys, Southern white boys. They're very particular. Okay, I'm a white girl, but I'm an educated white girl. I grew up in New York, I live in England. I'm going to walk into their headquarters in Tennessee and they're going to look at me like, where did this woman come from? You know, I'm going to be an alien. I said, the best thing you could do is I'm going to give you to, you know, Johnny Boy, Bubba, you know, in Tennessee, who's a lawyer, big fat white boy who talks the talk, looks the walk, and he's your guy if you want to get social change on this. And I will talk to Bubba and I'll make sure he does a good job, but you need the front guy. So if you start your own business, you have to know where you're good. But when Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, you name all the big firms, the big law firms, you know, the Fortune 100s, those are the places that I go after because those are my people. They went to Yale with me, they were Rhodes Scholars. Better for me to tackle the best and brightest group because they know me, they know I'm one of their kind, and I'm better able to change them. If we were to take the Walmart case, perfect fact pattern, I probably would have lost it because you get the bias there of all those juries. But if I'm in an investment banking house, you get to the top of the firm, you tell them you need to do better. You can't do this stuff. It's not allowed. On the trading floor, we had a black woman in her Chanel outfit who was slapped by her white boss. And she went ass over tea kettle and then landed and then soiled herself. Just stunning woman. She called me from the ladies' room in New York City in tears and she said, this has just happened. I said, where are you? She said, I'm in the ladies' room. I said, pick yourself up, lean off your legs and stuff, hold your head high, go to your desk, pick up your bag, and walk out the door. And then call me, but keep your dignity. Don't ever lose your dignity. That's what she did. I said, okay, go to the airport, get on a flight, and we'll take this case. And that investment bank apologized. They paid mega bucks to her, and then they put a program in place also so it wasn't going to happen again, and they fired the white guy who felt like it was okay to slap this woman. you know. Now, a place like, you know, this trading floor on this very impressive bank, wow. So don't tell me things have changed, because that just happened. It happens. Okay, now, you know, the guy might have just felt he was tired, you know, a lot of things happen. Things happen, but that, to some of us, really goes beyond the line.
Should the practice of organizations being able to buy people's silence when they're found to be discriminatory be outlawed? And what would you put in its place? And how do you think that would then impact the discriminatory practices in organizations?
Good question. You must have been in our boardroom today, because we have BBC cases, and this is the issue right now, these gagging orders. You know, when you get fired, of course, at the BBC, or made redundant, you're asked to sign a compromise agreement, you're given money, and then you have to give them silence. So the issue comes, as this gentleman has so beautifully put it, what do you do if you say, but I've been discriminated against, and you're buying silence to cover up wrongdoing? That's the issue. In the Daily Mail yesterday and in the Sunday Times on Sunday, you'll see that the firm, and I'm quoted there on this issue, we're taking the first, it looks like, case forward on this, that we don't want people to sign. We're representing a whole group of people. And our view is, if the problem is with these things, if it's one person who comes to us and says, look, you know, they've offered me 300 pounds to sign this thing, it's not hard for me to say as a lawyer, don't take the 300 pounds. Or I'll give you the 300 pounds, don't sign it. 300 pounds, 300 pounds. When they say we're going to give you 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, where is the cutoff point that you think, oh, that's enough money, I could, you know, maybe pay for that car, or I could, you know, do this or that? It becomes harder, the higher, and you've got to figure out when's the buyout number that woman or, you know, person of color just going to say, I got to take it, I just got to take it, I'll sign anything. You know, I really, and I don't want to be a poster girl for signing, or, you know, to be in the news. I don't want to be that person. But if we can get a bunch of people to agree that they still get their money, but they're not going to sign off on clauses that keep them quiet about discrimination, then that's the best. And that's our current issue, literally. I left my office today just on the phone with the newspapers about that. And we're trying to do it. We've got a whole bunch of cases coming in our direction. We represented Elizabeth Keene, for those who know the BBC, in the Pollard Review just these past couple of weeks ago. And so we're into that BBC world and representation. But good question. And I assume, what do you think, sir? Should they sign these confidentiality clauses? If I were to give you 100,000 pounds, would you sign a confidentiality clause because some girl pinched your backside? Well, let's hear it. Would you do that? Huh? What's his number, folks? What do you think, huh?
And I think we have to develop new ways of thinking about getting organizations to be responsible for discriminatory practice. And we need to expose these organizations, because if we don't, we won't have the changes that are necessary to stop discrimination taking place within an organization.
Yeah. Here, here. But would you take the 100,000? It's a hard one.
Yes. Two questions. The first from Catherine.
Okay. And from what you just said, you don't come from a traditional background in terms of having all the pecs in terms of your family background, but you seem to have sustained and maintained your growth. What strategies did you have in place? I know you talked about mentoring as a tool, and you talked about your social network. Well, you must have lots of knocks along the way. And when you mentioned the 5 reasons why people don't get along, you also experienced that. But how did you sustain yourself and keep growing? What did you put in place?
That's that, you know, age-old question. I've got 4 sisters. Well, I'm one of 5, as I said. We came from really lower middle class background. You know, no real push for anything. Now my sisters, you know, we share a certain resilience. My father beat us up routinely, raped some of us. Really terrible, terrible background. It took me a long time to find my voice on that, mostly because I was protecting my younger sister as much as I could. So a lot of damage in my family for that. And I think sometimes some of my sisters have not won that battle so well, and then, you know, then you just get more stubborn people like me who say, no, I'm going to survive. I don't know what the answer is. You look at the Holocaust studies, you look at, you know, people where people had to survive, look at, you know, Rwanda, you go around the world where it's really tough. And tough is lots of different things. And some people get through it and survive, and other people you know, their whole lives have been affected. I see my child protection practice, the men who have been, you know, played with as boys. You know, these men come in and their lives have been terrible because of this. You know, what is the answer? Isn't that one of the great questions to try to figure out? How do you do that? But I think you got to get a place in yourself where you say, I like myself, I know who I am, I live in the truth, so nobody can blackmail me. You know, you make your life choices and you live an open life. And I wouldn't, for me, fighting has been a good thing. You know, what are they going to do? You know, I say to women who come in who have been fired, so do you want to fight? You know, I've never had a woman we represented who has fight, nor a man, but I've never had a situation where we fought for someone, filed a lawsuit, and they've lost out. They've always done well, because then they go out and they sell themselves to the next employer as people who have got character, who've got integrity, and who are wonderful employees, but they're not going to watch bad things go on. And not every firm is going to want that sort of person. You'll find a whole raft of firms that will actually want people who try to do the right thing. Your question is the hardest one to answer. I don't know.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, how much of a male impact did you have in opening your business?
A male impact?
Yeah, how much male, when you opened your business, how many men were there with you? Was it solely women?
Oh, that's interesting. It was just me to start with. That's because I got a phone call from somebody who knew me, and he was trying to buy the Savoy. He's up against one of the big city firms, and he said, you know, I need you. And I said, why? He said, because I'm trying to buy the Savoy. I said, aren't you represented by Denton's, that big firm in the city? He said, yep. And I said, well, we don't, you know, I don't poach people. I just arrived, you know, in the country. I don't poach clients. And he said, but I need you. And I said, why? And he said, because there are 3 Americans buying the Savoy and a British Ambassador Theater Group. This is in the paper, so I can tell you it. And he said, we've just gotten the term sheet after 6 months of negotiating. They finally got the term sheet for the deal, which is basically the first time you bring an attorney in when you get the term sheet. So here Denton's had been on the tab running the bill for some time. And he said, we just got the term sheet. And I said, well, how can I help you? He said, well, it's a 50-50 deal. Okay, I get that. The Brits 50%, the Americans 50%. Okay, we can all follow that. And he said, we're going to share 50% of the profits. And I said, is that a problem? He said, no, is what we want, but apparently all the liabilities have been assigned to the Americans. So I said, okay, you need me. So we got involved with that deal. So it was just me then that started. And then I called somebody, a woman who had worked for me, just had a baby at Sherman and Sterling, and said, do you have some time on your hands? I've got a deal, I need some help. And then I hired a woman from Yale who just finished school. So the 3 of us did that. She arrived and she worked at 3 in the morning the first day she arrived in the country on this deal. We were 6 weeks in that. We did the paper, we closed the deal. And then interestingly, we gave a bill for $180,000 for that. And Denton's issued a bill for 480,000 pounds sterling. So a huge differential. So about, you know, 100,000 pounds we did and 480,000 pounds they did. We did the deal, we saved it. We had 3 people, and they probably had 33 partners and other people on the deal. So that's where it got started. And then after that, work started coming in. I guess we started I started advertising. We just took the best people that walked in, and we started getting some men, you know, increasingly, and I guess now it revolved, it changes all the time, you know, how many people we have from where and what part of the world. But no, I never thought of it, but you've asked a fair question, and the answer is it was probably a number of years in. I have never considered this, but I guess I was running a women-only business. That was never the mind frame. Yeah.
There was another question, yeah.
You mentioned about the court legislation that they're using in various countries in Europe. Don't you think that having a court system is actually bad on a company? Because, say for example, I'm a CEO and I've got to employ at least 5 women on the boardroom, and each woman that I'm interviewing has not got the right skills. And that going to be even worse for my company if, say for example, I interview you but you've not got the skills to do the job. Don't you think that would be problematic for a business owner?
You're saying if you have a quota, so you have to put 5 women on, but they don't have the skills?
Yeah, and I'm worried about getting in trouble by the government or something. Isn't that a bit of a problem?
I don't think there's a chance in the world that you could not find 5 talented women in the and the same thing goes, I mean, for men of color, women of color. You know, I mean, it is really quite amazing to me to see the numbers. you know, you can fill those ranks up with the most gifted people. Come on, all of us in this room could sit down and figure out how Walmart could put 5, you know, black women on their boards, and they'd be incredibly qualified, and not just the 6 black women in the States who go on every board. But I just don't think that's a possibility.
And by the way, I'm not anti-woman.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, we did a study in the United States. There are, you know, law firms, the very best law firms. When you look at the amount of blacks who are partners of the law firms, there are very, very few out of every couple of 100 lawyers. You make it 1 black. That's it. And of course, now increasingly it's female blacks that are getting promoted, not the men blacks. But what's also very interesting is that almost all of those blacks, almost all the time, they're so light as to be, they have to say, oh, I'm black. You say you're black? Oh, great. You know, who knew? You know. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you
very much.